Hello and welcome to SF Live episode number 96. My name is Kai Hoffman. I'm the CEO of the Soar Financial Group. Thanks for joining us this morning. In a few seconds, we'll be joined by John Black, President and CEO of Regulus Resources. And the light just went out behind you, John, so... and it's great to have John on in a few seconds. He first joined us about 7 months ago. He was episode number 14, if I remember correctly. And please use hashtag AskREG, that's the company's ticker on the Toronto Stock Exchange, for your questions during this live conversation with John. We'll get to those questions. We already received a couple on Twitter that you can see using that hashtag, and we'll get to those questions at the end, or we'll actually sprinkle them into the conversation as we see fit. And also make sure to follow us here on Twitter, follow us on YouTube, hit the alert, subscribe button. That way you get notified when we go public or live with another update. Now, let me switch over to Mr. John Black. John, how are you doing this morning? How are things?
Doing well, Kai. Nice to catch up with you again here.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. It's been a while. Like, I don't use Skype too often, and Skype told me that we last chatted on Skype 7 months ago, so we're definitely overdue for an update. Lots has happened.
Yes, absolutely. We've had quite a few new developments here with Regulus. So
perfect. And but before we get started, I'd like to start with a quick 30-second introduction to Regulus for the new listeners. Don't go too much into detail. We'll cover that. But just give us a quick 30-second overview. Who is Regulus? Who are you?
Okay, at Regulus, we're a group of very seasoned explorationists who specialize in finding large copper or copper gold deposits, capturing those at a point when the market's low or when we identify a project that the owners might be looking for a partner. And then we typically drill those projects out, we de-risk those projects, and then ideally we position ourselves to monetize that project by selling it to a major company that would like to put it in development.
Perfect. Let's leave it at that, because I know we have a lot of loyal followers as well. We don't need to recap the life history of Regulus Resources in too much detail. I think people can watch the interview from, I think it was in April, and you've done so many presentations online as well. They can find enough information there as well. Let's dive right into it. I want to start talk about share structure and how that's changed over the last 7 months. You've done a deal with Osisko Gold Royalties recently. Run us through that transaction. How has that helped improve your balance sheet? How much cash do you have?
Okay, the Osisko deal, which we announced about a month ago, was really a very critical deal for us going forward. And when you talk about it in terms of share structure, one of the nice things about it is it doesn't particularly affect our immediate share structure, our shares outstanding, because it's an agreement whereby we receive cash from Osisko and they receive certain rights on the project going forward, but it's non-dilutive at the first stage of the agreement because it's strictly a cash payment. So the three most important parts of this agreement for ourselves is obviously receiving that cash, which is US 12.5 million, so a little over 16 million Canadian, as a direct cash investment into the company with no issuance of shares, which is fantastic for us. The second is that even though we're doing an agreement with a royalty company, the net result of this agreement is we reduce the royalties on our property. And we'll get into the details of how that works. It's rather strange. It's making an agreement with a royalty company, resulting in a reduction of our royalty load on the property, which improves the project economics. It'll be quite critical in the future of the project, and also receiving cash to do it. And then the third thing that's very important for this is the technical endorsement. Cisco is a company that's well known. It's well known to have a pretty good eye on projects that are moving forward. And anytime a royalty company is willing to make an agreement like this with us, it means that they have confidence that the project will move to production. But they don't receive the benefits of this agreement if it doesn't move to production. And we found in our experience, the royalty companies are some of the ones that do the most due diligence on a project like ours to make sure they're confident about that. So that technical endorsement is outstanding, and it's a group we know well and we'd like to partner with as we move forward.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So they initially put $16.6 million into the transaction, or into the deal, or into the company. What did they get initially for it? What did they secure with that?
So what they secure with that, the principal benefit that they receive immediately with it is that they there are a series of royalties on the properties that we have. Our property position, 100% owned property position we have, is a collage of small historic claims. And each claim was acquired in a different manner, and a number of them have small royalties associated with them. And they're written in different ways. There's kind of a hodgepodge of these royalties. We have access to acquire those from the owners. They do cost us some money to do that, and so it hasn't been a high priority for us. But the agreement stipulates that if we acquire a royalty, Osisko will have the right to acquire up to half of the royalty that we acquire, and we'll extinguish the other half. So the best example is the one that was in hand as we went into this. We were just acquiring a royalty as we went into the agreement. Was the real driver, is there was a 3% royalty on one of the claims that we own. And that was the highest royalty we had. So we acquired that royalty. We reduce it to half, so 1.5% over the majority of that claim will be a royalty held by Osisko, and the other 1.5% will disappear. And another important part of this is we acquire that royalty or any other royalty we'll acquire. So we acquire the royalty. Cisco pays 75% of the acquisition cost, and they get half of the royalty. So they help us with the lifting on the purchase of the royalty. They get half the royalty going forward, and we extinguish it. So the net result is we cut our royalties in half. Where they overpay or they carry a heavier load on the royalty for purchasing it. So it's a great deal for our shareholders moving forward.
Fantastic. And let's talk about use of proceeds. Like, what are you going to do with the $16.6 million? Like, you mentioned you already bought one royalty back. What's use of proceeds going forward?
Okay, it's important to note on the royalty that we purchased too is that was the purchase price on that was $750,000
US, Canadian,
and that,
US, right?
Canadian. Or no, 750,000 US and that was accomplished before the agreement came into place. So the 12.5 US or the 16.6 Canadian is net to us. That's all funding that we'll receive on that going forward.
John, by the way.
Are we okay?
And you're back.
We're back. Okay. So that's all net to us on the funding. So that puts us in a good position. And as many of our loyal shareholders will recall, when we're drilling heavily on a project, like we just started again on the project, we typically burn on the order of about 20 million Canadian a year when we're drilling with 2, 3, 4 rigs throughout most of the year. And that's a mix of drilling and social costs and land acquisition costs on the project. We did a funding just a little under a year ago, just before Christmas last year, but we only did a funding of about $10 million, $11.5 million at that time, which was about half of what we would need for a normal year of drilling. The reason we did that was our share price was depressed. We didn't feel the market was in the best of positions. And we kind of knew we were working on alternative strategies to go forward. So this completes the second half and more of that drilling. So it sets us up to drill heavily from now throughout most of next year. And so the vast majority of that funding will go to direct drilling costs. But as the project advances, we're also, our strategy is to drill to define the size of the deposit. But an important part of our strategy is de-risking the project to provide the pathway for it to become a mine. And that's where interaction with the communities around us becomes quite important, and the benefits we provide, either through direct employment, but also through projects that benefit the community. So you'll see us increasing the number of projects that we're doing, and that's logical for the stage we're at with the project. So there'll be a portion of the funds that go to that, and there'll be a portion of the funds that go to continue acquisition of surface rights in the area.
I couldn't see a press release or so announcing the closing of the transaction with Osisko. Is that done? Is that dusted with?
It's closing at any moment right now. We projected the end of the month. It's going to take us just a couple more days to have it close here.
Perfect. So. Yeah, it's more of a money transaction, I'm assuming, and just getting it all done with, or is it a thing between the lawyers?
Right now, it's all paperwork on moving things back and forth on certain paperwork in Canada, the U.S., and Peru. All have to be taken care of. So all standard business. It will close.
All right. So nothing to worry about. Total cash position in the bank right now?
Well, with this funds coming in on this at any day right now, that'll put us on the order of about 18 million.
Perfect. That sounds good. Let's dive a little more into the drilling. You mentioned that use of proceeds obviously is for drilling. Let's run us through the campaign right now. You recently started drilling again first week of October. Run us through the delays that you've been encountering or the issues. Like you've announced it, then you had to delay it by a week, and like investors get a little nervous. Like, this is actually happening, right? So run us through the process. And I understand it's not easy working in Peru. Right, and during COVID, it's probably not the easiest at all. So run us through that process real quick and tell us where you're at right now.
Yeah, I won't go into all the details on it, but I can give an idea of some of the things that we consider when we do this. About the middle of the year, beginning about July, the Peruvian government started to allow activities in our space, particularly the mines, to open back up and gradually exploration programs. It was right at the height of the COVID crisis in South America. Keep in mind, in Peru, we're opposite seasons, so their heavy flu season is July, August each year. And despite their numbers peaking, they still felt they needed to open up the economy because they just couldn't keep it closed for too long. It's the same struggle we face in almost every country in the world on that decision. But as they opened that up, you had to work under some pretty strict protocols on how you worked to move forward. So we wanted to make sure we had those safe. Our priority is to keep our people safe and to keep the people that we interact with, the communities, our stakeholders around the project, safe and comfortable with what we're doing. And many of the small communities in the area we work are small towns in the mountains. They tend to be an older population. A lot of the young people move to the city, and they were very afraid of having COVID come into their communities. And as outsiders, if we were present in their area, whether we caused COVID to come in or not, it would be easy to blame it on us. So we wanted to make sure that we were working with the communities. They were comfortable with what we were doing. They understood how we had to set things up as we moved in. So that we projected that we would start up in September. It took us a little bit longer to get all of those stages in place. And at the same time, historically, we've been able to work out of the Tantuatai camp. We have an agreement, agreement with CMC Comalaichi, the joint venture that runs the Tantuatai mine. However, the COVID restrictions mean that they're really tight on space in camp to be able to keep their project running. So we were no longer able to use that camp, and we had to establish our own camp, and we had to work with the stakeholders in the area to make sure people were comfortable that we had a camp that was safe and not exposing the community to undue risk on that. So it took us just a little bit longer to get that set up than we want, but we were doing it carefully, and I'm happy to report the drilling's going well, and we're interacting with the community as well, and everybody's comfortable, which was important.
The drill program real quick. What do you have planned? What do you need to do? And how many holes in? Like whatever you can give us in terms of updates there and details.
Yeah. Certainly. We started with the first rig in the second week of October. And we haven't publicly announced it yet, but I'm happy to note that our second rig is up and running as well now. So we'll be drilling with 2 rigs from now for the foreseeable future in what we call the Anta Norte part of the project, the northern part of the project, which is the new area we've been able to move in with our new permit this year. It's an area we've been dying to drill for several years now, but we had to set up our own permitting process to get in. That permit was approved in the first couple months of this year. We had to go ahead in late February. We were ready to start drilling in March when the pandemic hit, and we had to shut everything down. So we'll have those 2 rigs working in the northern area. We're currently working with the mine to see, we have additional drilling that we need to do from our collaborative agreement that's closer into the mine, still extension drilling. We're working with them to see when we'll be able to add a 3rd rig onto the mine area to continue drilling there. So we anticipate we'll be drilling with 2, 3, maybe as many as 4 rigs from now throughout most of next year. The drilling pace will depend on a number of factors. How well we handle COVID situation. We have to make sure that we can continue to work safely on that. We are still in the dry season, although it's been a little bit of an unusually wet dry season this year, and the normal wet season starts in December through April. We anticipate we'll drill through that, but that sometimes slows us down a little bit during that period of time. So where we're at is we did our initial resource estimate, the resource that we have in hand, quite a sizable resource with very attractive grade to it right now. That was based on our phase 1 drill program. We initiated our phase 2 program in 2019. We've completed about 16,000 meters of phase 2 out of an anticipated 25 to 30,000 meter program. The end of phase 2 is really will be a point where we're comfortable we have enough drilling to report a significant increase in size. Depending what we find on these scout holes to the north as we move into these new areas to the north, there will be a required phase 3 to drill those out. So it'll be continuous drilling with a data cutoff probably about the middle of next year, at which point we'll update the resource, but we'll be continuing to define mineralization as we drill to the north.
I got a couple of follow-up questions there as well, especially about the Kolkirumi. I hope I said it properly. Yep. Kolkirumi claimed as well. Mm-hmm. You have to drill certain meters to earn in 7,500 meters. Where do you stand on that? Like, what's the plan there? Do you want to trigger that just yet?
Just to remind people, the Kolkirumi agreement is a block of ground on our north side that we have an option to earn up to a 70% interest from a subsidiary of Buenaventura. And to earn that interest, we have to complete 7,500 meters. We've drilled a little over 2,000 meters to date. So we have just a little under 5,500 meters to complete on that. That's where we've initiated our drilling. Both rigs are on that ground right now, and we anticipate, depending on how quickly the drilling goes, that sometime in the first quarter, say by March of next year, we will be done with that drilling. And at that point, it'll trigger a decision for Buenaventura, because we'll announce that we've earned into a 70% interest, and they have the clawback option, which allows them to claw back to 70%, leaving us with 30 by paying us US $9 million. We would strongly prefer to keep 70% of the project, but they'll make their decision. $9 million US is not a bad second prize for us on that.
But still, come on, you want to keep the project. We want to be in the driver's seat.
We'd like yeah, and the agreement stipulates we would still have layback rights and everything. We wouldn't lose control or be blocked by it if they earn back in. We prefer to have that additional 40% of the project.
Fantastic. And you mentioned also you're finally drilling the large geo anomaly, the blue mag high. Mag high or mag low? Actually, I keep confusing those. It's a mag low. The blue is always low, pink is high. If I'm not mistaken, I'm not an engineer, right?
Yeah, it's a magnetic center. It's a big magnetic anomaly, and it's one of the things that attracted Kevin Heather, our chief geologic officer, and myself to this project from the initiation of the project. It looked like it was a magnetic signature that's typical in many cases of a porphyry center that could cause a style of skarn style mineralization we see over much of the project. And we just haven't been able to drill 3/4 of that anomaly since we started while we waited for these permits. We got those early this year. We were all excited, and we've had to have a delay due to the pandemic. But now we're set up on that. And the way we'll be drilling is we'll start on the outer edge to the north side. It's an area that has the Kolki-Rumi ground, so it accomplishes several objectives. It's a valid target in itself, a little more likely to be skarn style mineralization than porphyry style mineralization. We will drill there. It also accomplishes the earn-in meterage that we needed to get to the Kolki-Rumi agreement, and it's where we have the most contiguous blocks of surface, so it's the easiest place for us to start as well. So it's a combination of factors. And then as we drill that out, we'll read what we get. These are new holes. They're big step outs. We could see all sorts of surprises geologically on this. And we'll read those as we go, but at some point we will begin to move at least one of the rigs towards the central part of the project as well, and we'll test those. By the end of the next 6 to 9 months, we'll have tests in all of the different manifestations of the anomaly on the north side. And so that phase 2 is a continuation of the immediate extension drilling from the mine, plus the initial drill holes into these target areas to the north, and then the phase 3 will be the follow-up on what we find there.
Gotcha. So you drilled for 3 weeks now. Give us a little more indication of when can we expect results? Like, what's the lab situation like? Are you sending it to Lima? Are you sending it to North America? The assays to North America? What's the plan there?
Well, fortunately, Peru's a mining country, and it's pretty well established with infrastructure. So we use ALS for our lab. They're based in Lima. The analyses are completed in Lima. So we don't have the delays of having to send things overseas or any of the complications that some people are experiencing. Until recently, the turnaround has been quite good based on the few of our peers that are starting to work again. And the labs have been pretty hungry, and they're allowed to work. So we're seeing more drilling starting now with some of our peers. So there'll be additional pressure, but no reason to believe that we won't experience a normal turnaround of 2 to maximum of 4 weeks from the lab. So we anticipate that'll go forward. What we don't know is the pace of the drilling, how quickly the holes will be completed. Our average depth of a hole is projected to be about 800 meters. On this, they can go longer if we're in mineralization. So they take a while for these holes to drill. It's very difficult drilling conditions, which is usually good geologically. The tougher the drilling, usually the more
metal in it.
Rock's messed up, and we like it better. So we kind of in some ways hope for slow drilling. It usually means that's good. So that pace, factored by COVID factors and weather factors, can determine things. But the best assumption would be that with 2 rigs going, they'll keep a similar pace. So we'd anticipate the first 2 holes will probably be out just before Christmas on that, and then particularly if we can put another rig or 2 on, hopefully we can pick that pace up. Okay. Ideally, we prefer to report batches of holes to give a little better geologic context, but we understand everybody's anxious on these first couple of holes.
Market is hungry for some results, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Just how many meters can you get done per shift?
We're in new ground on this, and we're using a new drilling company. and even a different style of drill rig than we've used in the past. We're using rigs that are a little more flexible in how we move them around. So we currently budget, just on our experience in the district, about 800 meters per month is a good way to take a look at it. And
yeah. Okay, perfect. Because you also answered
800 meters per month per rig.
Yeah. Now, because you sort of answered like the timeline when you expect first results just right before Christmas. Gotcha. One thing I noticed in your presentation as well, and it sort of coincides with the Resource 2 update, is PEA. I'm curious, like, what do you need to do to sort of get to that level? What needs to happen to get to a PEA level for 2021, as you mentioned in the presentation?
Yeah, there's some interesting challenges on this district. Normally, our philosophy on drilling out a project like this is that we like to drill out the full dimensions of the project before we complete a PEA. PEA is your first look at what the project's like, and it's probably best not to do it too early because you don't know if you found the best part of the project yet. And so ideally, you drill that all out. This project's a little bit different because we have an operating mine next door. They have a significant sulfide resource beneath their oxide mine, which extends onto our ground, so we share the deposit with them. They're run out of oxides in 2025, so there's a natural transition point for them to begin to look to exploit their sulfides. We think our portion of the deposit is key to developing the most profitable mine going forward. So that picks up the pace on the project, and we have enough mineralization right now that if we were to complete a PEA on that, it would be an attractive number. So that argues in favor of us moving the PEA forward. But we do face some challenges. Our land position is a bit interfingered with the neighbors on the Comalaiche, the neighbors that operate the Tantahuatay mine next door. We have a collaborative agreement with them that allows us to model a pit that lays back onto their ground and reveal our full resource. And that agreement works well between us and the Comalaiche JV, as well as with the regulators in Canada. But to move to a PEA stage, it gets a little bit more complicated because we would have to make an assumption on costs and for us to assume that the neighbors would carry their share of those costs requires more of an agreement than we have right now. And so we're a little bit in a position where we could do a PEA just on our ground, but it would undervalue the combined project. So we're actively exploring with our neighbors and with the regulatory authorities on how we might be able to reveal a PEA that's more representative of the true value of the project.
Fantastic. All right, perfect. We're running late already on time. I always let these interviews run too long lately, but it's always good conversation. Let's switch over to Twitter and the questions we have there on Twitter. Oh, and I screwed up your framing there. I got to update that real quick. And let's do that while I read the questions. And Pamplona Trader, actually, and I'm sure you're quite familiar with him, had a couple questions about what's going on. So... And he's asking, of course, we talked about some of it. How many meters of the required 7,500 to complete the why do I struggle with this word? Kolkurumi earn-in, and how many meters have you done so far? You mentioned 25 already, and you're drilling on it right now. You expect to complete by March, correct?
Approximately March, if everything goes well on the drilling, yes.
Okay, that's the second part of the question as well. Like, when do you expect, or when do you anticipate completing that meterage? We just said in March. And the other question, I think we talked about it as well, is like, when do you plan on drilling the Maglo at Antanorte and or follow up on the Precha at Antanorte? So we haven't talked about the Precha part.
Yep. The moving on to the additional drilling in the central part of the anomaly, we want to get this northern area drilled first, and a lot depends on what we see in these initial holes. And so we will read these holes, and that'll determine when we start moving into the area. If the area that Pamplona is referring to is the central part of the anomaly, that's on 100% Regulus ground. We absolutely will drill it. It's an attractive target to us. But if we move all the rigs there, then we don't complete the Kolkurumi earn-in as well. So most likely in the new year, we'll probably free one of the rigs up and move it down to test the central area, and we'll continue to drill in the northern. So the best estimate right now would be early in the new year when we move to the central anomalies.
Fantastic.
The central portion of the anomaly.
Alrighty, I think that completes the questions.
And at that same time is when we can begin to drill back towards the mine to some of those really hot intercepts we've had in breccias associated with hole 26 particularly.
Fantastic. Alrighty, I think that sort of concludes the questions. We got one last topic we can talk about, and that's your new board addition. What does it mean? Like, you appointed Anna Tudela to the board. What does she bring to the board that wasn't there before?
Well, we're extremely excited about having Anna on board, and many companies like ourselves, we're all exploration geologists in many cases. We're technical people. We start work, and there's a tendency for small junior explorer companies to have boards that look almost like their management team. They tend to be more technical guys, and that's great because they understand what we're doing. It's fluid. We're more agile in that sense. But when you build a proper board, what you really need to be doing is looking for board members that are complementary to the skill sets that you bring as management. And so I think a lot of our peers overlook having people that are more skilled in corporate governance and financial aspects of what we're doing. So Anna brings a really strong background in corporate governance. She's been a corporate secretary for a wide variety of companies, most recently for quite some time for Goldcorp. And she's been involved with quite a number of M&A transactions over her career. So in addition to this, Anna's originally from Peru. She's lived in Canada for quite a long time, so she's very bilingual. She understands the project. She actually knows many of our partners in Peru as well. So she's an instant plug into our company and basically is very complementary to the technical skill sets that we're strong in, is bringing those additional skill sets on the corporate governance and financial side of the equation
Sounds
here.
quite forward-looking and forward-thinking there in terms of M&A and future transactions. So I like hearing that, and I think that's a good note to end the interview on as well. And I always like to give you the opportunity at the end to just 30 seconds, summarize it, the opportunity, next catalyst, next steps. We sort of talked about it, but just put a bow around it for us.
Okay, great. Well, we're on to a great project. For those of you who know us, our business model. We successfully executed it when we sold the Kira deposit and Antares to First Quantum a number of years ago. So we've completed our business strategy one time, and we're now on to the Antiquary project, which we think has all of the earmarks of being a project that will be developed by a major mining company or a group of major mining companies developing it. We're partially through drilling it out. We have over 250 million tons of indicated resource and 267 million tons of inferred, so almost 500 million tons of total resource at quite an attractive grade. Plenty of room for it to continue growing. This new drilling we've just initiated will take it to the north side and increase the size of it. And we're already under the microscope of a number of companies. It's natural at this stage that groups would be entering into confidentiality agreements with us and reviewing the project. Several of those groups managed to see the project before the pandemic shut things down. We've been conducting virtual site visits for others in the past few months, and it won't be long before they can get their teams back out on the ground. It doesn't mean anything's imminent, nor would we want that. We want a little bit more time to fully dress out the whole project on this, but it's indicative of the environment we're in, where a lot of the copper and particularly the gold companies are very interested in monitoring and potentially acquiring world-class or tier one type assets. And this project has those earmarks of being one that they have to keep their eye on. So we think we're going to be delivering a great discovery right at a perfect time when we have elevated precious metal prices, historically elevated precious metal prices, copper moving up, and with good reason to believe it'll be even stronger price in the future. And that creates a situation where companies are interested in acquiring such assets as we have.
Fantastic. So, John, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the update. And
great, thanks, Kai, and let's get in touch a little more.
7 months.
More
time flew by, but let's do that more frequent.
We're in the strange time warp right now, but we'll have news to talk about in the next few months.
We'll definitely catch up on those. Everybody else, thanks for joining us. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for listening in. Thanks for listening to the replay later on. Really appreciate that. Follow us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter. Make sure to hit the alert button, the follow button, and that way you get notified when we go live with another update. Also, we'll make this conversation available on any podcasting platform that you can imagine, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and also Instagram. So follow us there as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk again soon, John.
Great. Thanks, Guy.